Good evening, afternoon. Hi, Sam here, Real Love Guitars. I've just been in what we would call a tiz. That's what we'd call it. Yeah, having basically lost my memory card for this camera. And for some reason, it's a big one. It's got, I don't know, 64 gigs on it or something. But it's for some reason it seems to be the only one that will work with this camera, and there's nothing particularly special about it. But I bought others to replace it because I lost this one before. And the new ones I got wouldn't work, and then I found this one. So I've just gone and lost this one again. And thankfully, Claire's just refound it for me. And anyway, so it means we're back on track. But I was kind of worried because I thought I'd have to do the whole of this, excuse me, the whole of this Fender Lite Ash Telecaster without it. But as it happens, I had to get started. But here we are. Well, we've got the neck defretted. Ah, dun dun dun. And it's a lovely sort of bird's eye maple neck, very Korean-made guitar, and it has. We've ordered some other tuners for this because Alex wasn't particularly happy with these, so we've got some other tuners, but they have of course these have the Fender lugs locating them, so we may need to work around that when it comes, but that's not such a big problem at all. Or if it's too big a change, we stick with the originals, but I don't think we should have to. So what I'm going to do right now is, since I've now got the camera running, I can really, we're kicking off with this guitar right here, and of course what you didn't get to see was the rest of it, which is here untouched. I haven't done any cleaning or anything. This is the Korean-made Lite Ash Telecaster. Mixed reviews or mixed views on these things, and yeah, some people love them, some people have found them not as good as they should have been. But what you have is a Korean-made Seymour Duncan equipped Telecaster with these. All of them had these, or most, I think all of them had these lovely bird's eye maple neck, if you have a good look at it. So this came to me because Alex I think he rediscovered it in his attic after not having played it for years. Got it years ago, but I think in his words this guitar irritated him. The action was wrong, couldn't keep it in tune, wouldn't intonate, played, everything buzzed, couldn't bend notes. Excuse me. So it just basically everything wasn't right and nothing was right. So he sent it down, and what we decided, the other thing was that there was a fret with a big gouge out of it down here, and there's quite a bit of wear on the other frets. So I gave him two options. One was to just do a setup on the fairly skinny vintage wire, type vintage style wire that was in here. I would say it was kind of small to medium size gauge, or thin, medium thin, or thin medium, whichever way you want to look at it. So it was either carry on and work with that, but of course to get the wear out down here and also on this particular gouged fret, that would have probably taken a fair bit off what wasn't a huge amount of fret metal anyway. So the alternative was to say, to hell with it, let's have a full set of frets, and that's what we've gone for. So where are they? Oh, they're kicking around. I've taken them off, and here they are, the new frets, ready cut and ready to go. Excuse me. So we're starting from the thin end of the wedge down to the other end. So being a bolt-on neck, very kindly, we can get ready to put it through the clamp with, it's a 9.5 radius, and it's an interesting one because I had a good look at this neck, and everything online that I've seen about it says that it's 9.5. But actually on a real close examination, the fingerboard itself looks like it behaves more like a 12 down at this end. It's quite amazing. Actually, that's a bit too flat. So, oh dear, no, next door. You can never hear this. Some people tell me you can't hear it, but there we are. So yeah, we go from 9.5 to down to what looks like a 12 at the bottom end. I couldn't find any reference to that in the specs. However, what was interesting is looking at the frets themselves, they were all 9.5. So I'm going to go with 9.5, and I'll do this end first. And if they just look like they're not sitting right, then I'm going to have to stop and reconsider. I mean, I can push them in for well, all I have to do is push them in for a 12, but it's quite challenging to sort of, you have to start flipping these inserts around because you have to kind of go for the 12 and then back down to 9.5 to make sure the ends are in. It's doable. It's just I'd rather it wasn't compound, especially when it's not advertised as such, or I couldn't see any reference to it. So here we have the beautiful neck. I said I was going to start with that end, so why don't I stick with what I said. The other thing I was going to say, which I didn't have, again I didn't have the camera ready for, is I inherited this morning, or a local chap had this for sale, and he came round because he got my number from somewhere, and he wanted to he had a guitar that he wanted to get rid of, and was I interested? And I said, well, I didn't know until I saw it, but I'd let him know what it was worth or what he might sell it for locally. So he came round, and I'm looking for something here a minute. Difficult. I can't. Oh, what is wrong with me? He came round, and what we had was a what looks like an Encore strap body with a white strap pick guard, which is this one. No, it's not that one. It's this one up here, which has pretty cheap looking equipment on it, and this very light wood body, which, do you know what, I'm looking at this as a ply. Well, no, it might not be. Does it mean routed? No, it's ply. It's a plywood body. There we go, laminate body. So, which is strange because laminate is usually, or very often, can be heavier than the timber. But yeah, I can see it straight away. It's a laminate body. So this pretty horrible laminate body, which I wasn't interested in, but it has had a Mighty Mite neck on it, which I think is okay. Actually, it had a bit of a, it's under a bit of pressure to flatten it out, so it had a bit of a built-in curve to it. What it also had on it, so you can see Mighty Mite, licensed by Fender. So it's a nice, obviously it's a nice piece of maple, as you can see, in the Fender shape, because it's usable as a Fender neck. And what came on it was a set of these shallows, which I've never seen before. Quite interesting looking things, but they're very nice condition, a very good quality, or very nice smooth turning tuners. So I got a reasonable deal. It wasn't fantastic. I think I paid 30 quid for what could be a very nice neck. If it turns out to be worth it, I might refret that anyway. This has been quite heavily played, but it's yeah, Mighty Mite, which are fairly well respected. There was a screw sheared off, one of the tuner screws was sheared off in there, so I managed to dig around it and get it out with, I actually drilled lots of very fine holes around it until it was pretty much standing up, and then I went round with the Dremel drill as if it was a kind of like a dentist tool really, and eventually I managed to waggle it out, so I've obviously filled it here, and that will be cut flat and sanded flat. So yeah, that's nice neck, possibly a very nice neck. I'm reserve judgment on that for the minute. Possibly a very nice neck, and definitely some very nice tuners. So not altogether bad. Now I'm just now going to switch into fretting mode. So I'm getting my bits and pieces. So I want my thick glue. I want my defroster. You know what I mean. I got my. I need my thing. So yeah, it's all go. I've got quite a bit on the go. I've got this Fender here. I've got a Fender in the house waiting for a bridge, which is going to get a new bridge, and I've also got my I've got a Adams X, well, what a Super Strat sort of body, which I'm going to put some new pickups in, which have arrived. Well, basically it's created a new guitar with a completely different neck on it. So I've got a Wilkinson and an Iron Gear Alchemist P90 to mix and match together. See what that does. Anyhow, so here we are in the world of refretting. There's a couple of things about this neck that I've noticed. Actually, it's all looking good. I've cleared out the slots very thoroughly. We have a couple of dents on here which aren't the end of the world, so I may just leave them. My kind of tendency would be to try and lacquer over them, but sometimes you can end up making something not feel worse. You can smooth the lacquer out, but you can leave a bit of it can sometimes leave a bit of a shiny patch which doesn't quite match the road worn, hand scuffed dullness of it. So given that it's on the top edge, it's not really a feel problem. So what I've done with this thing is I've taken off, I've obviously warmed and removed all the original frets. We have some strange marks on the fingerboard here that I thought somebody had refretted it before, these black marks, because they would be typical of split wood that comes up with an earlier fret, but there's no feel on it, so it's just cosmetic, so I don't know what caused that. Anyway, otherwise everything's looking good. We've got our beautiful jumbo frets lined up, we've got our debonder here ready to go, we've got our thick super glue, and of course the next thing I'm going to need is about 1 million sheets of this stuff. I have a sort of constant build up, a constant pile of screwed up bits of this on the floor, and that's basically so all the way along I can remove any excess glue. I use super glue. I spent quite a few times in the past using wood glue, but I have to say, if I'm refretting for a 30-year playing life of a guitar, I used to do wood glue because I like the idea that someday in the future somebody would find it a bit easier to undo. They too could get a soldering soldering iron on it, and lo and behold, it would lift a bit easier for them. But the truth is, 30 years from now, frankly, you'd be lucky if the guitar was still around. So, having already it's now already what? This thing's probably 15 years old already. So, to be honest, I'm just not that precious about it now. What I really want more than anything is that by the time I've pressed these firmly and cleaned up around the fret itself, I want to know this thing is in really strongly. I don't want any sort of waiting overnight for it to dry and then find a couple of frets haven't seated properly. That's the downside of doing it with something slow drying like wood glue. It's kind of nice, it cleans up a bit nicer because you can clean it with water, obviously, but like I said, because you end up having to clamp it, there tends to be a big chunk of time where you don't really know what's happened until you remove the clamping. And then I've had too many occasions where you find one in a sequence of 6 or 7 that suddenly or just isn't seated right, and you've got to go back to square one a bit, which is a bit demoralising. Right, I'm going to use this time. I don't usually. So I've got this, and I'm going to use a bit of foam, which I shall find over here, won't I? Yeah, I will. There it is. So, okay. So what I'm going to do, the process of this is I'm going to fret this guitar neck. I'm going to then possibly do a kind of light level with a block, or I may not do it at all. If it looks nice and even, I'm not going to do it. I'll leave that to the banana tool in my normal fret leveling. So I'm going to fret this, do the edges, and do all the fine tuning with the files, do the ends with the files and so on. Then when that's done, I'm going to put a new bone nut in here, and then I will probably put I will put these same tuners back in for the time being, the original tuners, because the new ones haven't arrived yet. But I'll put the original tuners back in, reattach the neck to the body, and then go through the full setup process with the new frets and the new nut. And then once that's done, and I'm going to use the old strings to do that. Once that's done, then I'll take the old strings off, polish up all the frets, get it all ready, and wait for new tuners and when the new tuners come, then restring it with some new strings. Okay, so we begin now. We start. And what have I got? I've got all my stuff here. Now I was going to do so. Here's something I was going to do, and every time I come to do frets, I keep telling myself I'm going to do this, and then I keep forgetting to do this. So I've got a grub screw which holds the brass fret press inserts in place, and it's a bit long and it's a bit worn, so it really annoys me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck a hole over the floor. I'm going to go with a smaller one. Let's see just what I've got first of all. Let's see what will fit. There's probably some really tiny ones in here I don't want to lose, but then I haven't got a complete set of those diddy ones anyway. So let's try this one first and see if it does. More than anything, what I want is a fresh end to the thing, and I want it out of the way so it doesn't stick in my way. That's good. I'll go with that. Let's shove this in here. So there you go, there's a little bit of housekeeping done for once instead of forgetting and carrying on. Well, I haven't got any more now, but what I do like to have is some of those very short, I haven't got a complete set of the 6mm, I think the 6mm grub screws. Very often on a telly bridge or a strap bridge, when you have a nice low action, you end up with the default screws, grub screws, sticking miles up. That can be really annoying, considering you know, if you're palm muting, it can feel really, yeah, just a pain. So you can get these little 6mm ones, so that when you have a low action and the saddles are quite low, you still don't have they don't have much sticking up, so you get this really nice smooth feel. Now, is this even going through? Yeah, kind of. All right. So we are ready, and if I'm going to do this back end one, I'm going to use a piece of foam to support the rest of the neck as I go. I'm going to make sure it's square. One of the things I saw on a guitar that I worked on last weekend, and that was Daniel's Ibanez AH10. And there were lots of little tram lines across the frets, and if you see those on a guitar, you can be fairly sure that what happens is somebody's doing fretting, and what they do is, before they've clamped the fret, they make sure the call is aligned, so they make start like that, and then they press down on there to kind of get it into the right plane for the job. And it's so sharp, and the wood usually is so soft, it leaves little tram lines on here, so it's a dead giveaway. You kind of learn the hard way, I suppose, and then try not to do it. Now, with this, we've got rosewood, we've got maple here, and that maple, what I don't want to do is I want to try and get as little of, or try and use as little of that super glue debonder as possible around this, the lacquer that's on here. It's a kind of dull lacquer, as happens, but so I'm trying to use it very carefully, so we put a little bit, I put a little bit right on the end, because I want the little overhang that I've built into these frets, I want that to seat down properly, and then I'm kind of just wetting the tang of this down the middle. Flip it over, line it up, and we should be ready to go. So just line it up with my fingers, feed it onto here. Now this is close to the overhang, part, so we don't want to hit it so hard that it breaks. We do want to get it in to begin with. Okay, and that's actually just on the edge, so we can put a little bit of pressure on. Now what I do there is I hook this to my faithful big screw stick. Now, so I hope that never breaks, because that will be all over the place. I'll shoot myself and blind myself in the eye. Now I get my bit of tissue paper and hopefully my file, and run along there and get rid of as much or any of the glue that's sticking up or squeezed out. And The reason I put that shorter what's it on was because I couldn't get under the longer one. Now this is now perfect, so I can get to both sides of this at once. Now that looks, from here, looks to be absolutely perfect on the radius. So I'm using the 9.5 insert. I've got just over 9.5, so they're just a little bit tighter on the ends, and I'm on fretboard which is probably 10, probably closer to 12 according to my gauge, but it's taking the 9.5s. And the point is, we'll get, even though it may not be, this may be variable. I mean, what I've noticed up here, by the way, this is 9.5, but there is a flat spot. It may be just from the manufacturer, it may be from years of play. So the truth is, if you're lucky, you'll get a nice even set of frets by the end of your refretting. What you probably don't start off with is a perfectly level fretboard, because it has all these sort of idiosyncrasies. Yeah, that's right. Now there is a little bit of glue come out there on the lacquer, so I'm just going to give it a quick rub down, and then as quick as anything I'm just going to get rid of that again, so there's nothing left on the surface of the lacquer. I don't know if you can see that, but to all intents and purposes that is perfect. Now what I've done is, because I've cut an overhang, I've preserved the little end fills all the way down here, and it's much tidier than chopping right the way through them and having to refill them with your own material, because you often can't match it quite as well, but this way looks pretty neat and tidy. So I picked my second fret up, and again blob on the end, just to help that overhang part, and then a bit of a just a wipe down the sides really. This is mostly going to hold under grip, but the glue will give it that sort of permanent squeeze. And then again, tap into the press and line up for a good firm bite, dead central on the brass insert if possible, and then hook it on. So while it's hooking on, or while it's hooked on, I can go some way to cleaning out as much of the surplus glue as possible, so that we don't have too much to do with deep under at the other end, because it is probably, I'm not quite sure exactly what it does to poly, but I think it has an adverse effect on nitro if you happen to be doing a guitar with nitro. So this is a nice old played in neck. It's quite a chunky fingerboard, I noticed, compared to some. Now I'm just having a quick squint at this, just to make sure these feel right in relation to each other, and they do, as I'm saying, no worries with that, sitting nicely. Again, this one just an absolute tiny fraction of hint of shine where there's a tiny bit of glue over the edge there. Get in there, clean it up, and then again rub it straight off. Are we looking? Yep. So once this is done, what I'll do is I'll go down and bevel the ends off until they're really crisply beveled at about 35 degrees. I used to do a 90-degree cut first, but it did so much damage to the fingerboard, you don't actually need to do it. In fact, it's almost pointless. In fact, yes it is, you're almost guaranteed to create more damage than you need. So I've given up with that, and I used the beveler, the 35-degree beveling part of the tool, as the cutting to length tool, and it works really well, and you never end up damaging the side anymore. Kind of like it took me a long time to learn, and when I figured it out I just thought, why did I ever use it at all? All those little scuffed up edges of fingerboard that I had to put up with. So get this in the middle, get this all tidy, and then squeeze down and clamp. And then I end up just chucking this stuff on the floor while I'm doing this, so it's not in my way. I can come back to clearing up later. This is probably not the best thing to use. Let's see if I've got something better. Something soft. It isn't going to do any harm, but we'll get right into the space I'm trying to get into. Just had a very interesting email from a chap whose vintage V99 left-handed I set up more than 2 years ago now. A chap called Jürgen, who's a medical doctor, research doctor, or medical professional, let's put it that way. Works over in the UK, and yeah, basically that's a really clean one actually. He got in touch back in 2016, and I was working in London at the time, so we met up at London Bridge Station and handed over the guitar, and I came back and did the setup, and then as it happened I took some leave at the time, I seem to remember, so I wasn't going to be back up in London, so I ended up couriering him the guitar back. I just had an email from him today saying he asking if I remembered him, and reminding me that I set up his guitar, and he said that recently British Airways managed to smash it, and sent me some pictures of the damage. And what's happened is that if that's the body and that's the neck, somebody's trodden at the point of the join of the two and prized the neck, or folded the two halves so that the bolts on the neck on the outside have come up, ripped out of the wood. And Jürgen was asking whether it was something that I could repair, and apparently British Airways will pay for the repair. So of course, being cheeky, I took the opportunity to show him a really nice left-handed oak caster that would do away with the chance of ever having a guitar broken by BA ever again. But I said also at the same time that I'd be happy to do it. So I gave him a few options. To be honest, I'm not completely sure I can imagine that much damage being done without there being some other structural overstressing to the neck or some part of the body. So what I've said to him is he's welcome to send it down, and there'll be probably three possible outcomes. One is that I'll fix the neck, do a light setup, and everything will be fantastic. The second one will be that I fix the neck back, or refix the heel and so on, but the stresses will have put the setup so far out that we have to do some more fret leveling, which is a slightly more expensive option. Or the third option will be that I get it down, take one look at it and say it's just not economical, even if British Airways are paying. But on the plus side, he can send it down in two pieces because it's in bits, effectively. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to hearing what he'll say about that. And so if all goes well, might see an old friend back in the workshop. And whether or not it's economical to repair, I do like the idea of fixing a damaged old dog and getting it working again, because I never like to say, give up on an old guitar that could play. So, quick look down here. Everything's looking absolutely fab. Looks great. I mean, the truth is, when you get to a neck like this, you can see the quality of it. Everything about it is just, there's no surprises, nothing's sitting wonky, there are no twists or turns, everything's just right. So I would like to be in a position where I could put this kind of quality of neck onto everything I make. Maybe I get to a place where I can do that. Obviously in the first instance I'm using Chinese factory offerings, the best I can do for the time being, or make it affordable at the time being. But in the future, nice bird's eye maple neck made by someone like Fender who makes these. Okay, so you can see that once you get into the swing of it, you can, providing you've prepared the slots and the neck first, which takes time, and obviously I did that off camera, but you know, once you've got that taken care of and you know your routine, and you can just kind of start motoring then. I met my fellow guitarist in the band I play in, did until various things got in the way for the temporary hiatus, but met with him today and we were talking about he wanted to learn to fret his guitar, and I was basically explaining to him about the importance of getting all of that taken care of first, particularly getting the face of the fingerboard smooth and even, and also the absolute importance of getting the slots cleaned out, and failing to get them cleaned out can be absolutely the difference between whether you get you know, your fret seated well or not. And I think that was one of the problems that Daniel had with one of his guitars, the Hohner H2, which had been refretted, but just some gunge in the slot meant one of the frets, the 0 fret in fact, was sticking up a little bit high, which then pushed out the first fret action by a couple of tenths of a millimetre, which at the kind of low actions we're talking about is quite a substantial amount in terms of feel. Can really change the feel of it. So as I say, it's all down to getting the fingerboard prepared. There was an article I was just reading the other day, or watching the other day, where somebody was, a luthier was making, not a claim exactly, but making a noise about never having to fret level again, you know, as if he had some sort of secret formula or something. And actually when you watch the video, what he really was telling you was, if you're building a guitar and you come to making the neck, then do this, this and this to ensure that your frets seat absolutely perfectly in this new neck. And of course, yeah, that's the secret of it. Make sure your frets seat perfectly. Now of course, if you're, this is a good one, but if you're working on a second-hand neck, you can't do a lot of that preparation. You know, it's not down to you to make this neck necessarily the perfect radius so that your frets will seat with no trouble at all. You may inherit something that has a lot of wear, or that the previous owner doesn't want you to resurface or something like that. So you can't always be sure to create the perfect conditions to allow you not to level frets. So yes, he's right. In the ideal world, you can end up seating some frets perfectly. I get a feeling that these are going to be pretty close to perfect because of the quality of the neck and the underlying, well, the quality of the fingerboard that they're going into, and the care with which I've prepared it, but and the experience I've got in doing it. But I still occasionally will have an old guitar that almost no matter how much time I take in prepping it, may still find a fret just not doing what I want it to do, and sometimes I will pull it and do it again. In fact, the last time I pulled a set of frets, or any frets, was exactly when I thought I'd do them with wood glue, and I did a set, pressed them in, clamped them, came back several hours later, took one look at them and thought, out they come. And of course the only good thing was that because I'd done them with wood glue, it probably did help them to soften up a bit to pull them out again. And that was the kind of last straw really for me. I just didn't bother after that. I thought, no, it's more important that they sit exactly where they should, and you know, and if the customer gets a beautiful playing guitar for the next 30 years on these frets, I'm not going to get all uptight about whether it's a little bit harder at the end of it, or when the customer or the customer's heirs come to refret it in some far distant future, some post-North Korean Holocaust future. Anyway, so it was nice having JT down over the weekend. It was Tuesday, wasn't it? JT came down on Tuesday and brought 2 guitars with him, and he brought the Manta Ray by Reverend, which is that beautiful green thing. I put a picture of it on my Facebook, but JT didn't want to star in any video, which I quite understand. So we had the cameras off for that setup, and we had a good time just shooting, as they say. Talk about kind of loads of seditious subjects, and tired the moon with our chats, being similar age and having done similar kind of work in the past as well. We had some common experiences, but anyway, it was a nice afternoon. But the guitar, I loved it. The Reverend guitar by Joe Naylor, the guy who makes the Railhammer pickups that I like so much. Beautiful guitar, absolutely great fun to play on. And JT had fitted a Duesenberg, yeah, I don't know, that's Steinberger, a Duesenberg tremolo to it, which felt and sounded great. So it was a really good guitar. Made me hanker after one. Anyway, so JT left behind another guitar, which is a Fender Telecaster in red. I don't know, it's a red finish, kind of red sunburst, dark red and black sunburst, and it's a HH model, and I'm changing the bridge on that, so you'll see that come through here. I was lining up to obviously not have it on video if I couldn't find the video SD card, but Claire saved the day. So that was a really fun afternoon. It's tiring too, because I guess when I'm on my own doing this, I can at least kind of put the pause on and go and make a cup of tea and take half an hour out, or if the weather was nice in the summer, get in the hammock. But with a visitor and spending time with them in the workshop, it's quite a bit more intense, and I think JT found it quite an intense thing for it, you know, for him as well. But I think because we were talking so much, I took a lot of care with it as well. We kind of went slow, really. So it was probably about at least 4 hours, sort of standing up, working and talking, and in pretty much non-stop. So I think he was absolutely beat by the time he drove home to Hook, which was again quite some journey back. But it was well worth it. Nice to have company in the shed, and also he was absolutely thrilled with the way the Reverend turned out. So we've got the job on the Telecaster, and I had a look. His request was to have a kind of look around at some trem systems, and while there are some trem systems for Telecasters, they get a bit more complicated when it's a carved top Telecaster, which is again obviously not quite standard. So in the end we've decided to go with a hip shot bridge, which is pretty much the standard fixed hardtail bridge, but it's quite a mean looking thing, and so it's kind of a bit of a like for like, but he didn't get on with the Fender bridge that was on there, so that's going, and we'll go with the hip shot instead, and then followed up by a nice fret leveled setup. Again, a bit like this guitar, to go from annoying and infuriating to totally fall in love territory, which is of course that's what it's all about. That's the aim of this game, as you can tell. So there we go. It's a bit of a change, because I've switched over now onto the other side of the neck call. so that a different sort of pressure or a different place where the hook goes on. But other than that, so of course with a bolt-on neck like this, it's kind of a lot easier. It's funny, I know a lot of techs and luthiers charge more for a set neck and or bounded neck, bound neck, and I'm very ornery in that I just charge one price. It's a little bit more, actually no, you know what, it's no more complicated doing this neck than it is doing a bound neck. I treat this, in fact I treat just about every neck as if it were a bound neck. What is more complicated is a fixed neck, and I just do whatever it takes to get it done. But it's more complicated because obviously it doesn't feed all of the, I can't get all of the neck through the that thing there, the press. So I end up having to make a sort of suspended jig, flying jig in here with ropes and guitars hanging off the bench and so on and so forth. But it works, and it can be a little bit harder to apply the same sort of clean force to higher frets on a set neck, and that is one of the kind of, it's one of the times when you know, it really makes even more sense that you've got the whole thing cleaned out, the slots all perfect, and the radiusing on your wire and everything has got to be spot on. And since I now well, these days I take a lot more care on pre-cutting the wire. Used to be I sort of cut it willy-nilly and relied on the grinding block of doom to take care of shortening it, but actually I'd much rather cut it much more precisely now. It saves a little bit on metal, but it's not the main reason. The reason is so I don't have to do too much kind of grinding and so-called destructive work on the edges. Also, I find that when I'm working with if I cut these really carefully, I can cut them, I can end up using the beveling thing, I can end up with the tangs are just short of the edge of the thing, which gives them some room for the fingerboard to shrink and stretch, or sorry, shrink and expand. And if I'm very careful with how I cut that thing, the bevel, I can hopefully just do it in a way that it allows for a bit of expansion. Truly the only way of allowing for quite a lot of expansion, which I found on some newer necks that I bought, is to cut the fret even tighter than I've cut it here. So genuinely start by cutting that overhang just short of the edge of the fingerboard before I even file it, so that it doesn't even reach the edge, and that gives you that bit more expansion room. And that, to be honest, I haven't ever found it a problem with a well-seasoned older neck like this. I found it a problem with brand new Chinese necks from the factories, because it's often the case that the stock of timber they've used isn't as dry as, you know, somebody who's charged a couple of £100 for a neck and had the timber sitting for years in carefully controlled environments. So I'm getting a bit loaded with glue at the moment. So yeah, it's a kind of, you get used to it. So with some of the oak casters that I make, I cut the frets short, just a millimetre, not even a millimetre. It's probably something like 0.2 of a millimetre short of the edge, so that it's got that reduction, shrinkage room. As I found that the Chinese necks, they seem to find that the British weather, whereas you and I would consider it to be inherently wet and damp around here. It's actually, it seems like the relative humidity of the British climate is actually relatively drier than the region where they make some of those rosewood necks that I have used, which is quite amazing really, because but then when you think about it, think about some of the film you might have seen or TV you might have seen from those industrial parts of China, you know, some of them are incredibly steamy and subtropical but humid, even more so than today, because today it's only 77 relative humidity in here, which considering it's piddling with rain most of the day isn't a vast amount. Alright, let's go with a new stick. Okay, so I'm just keeping going purely out of laziness for switching it off, but also because I know there's one or two people who would be interested to see this all the way through. Not that there's anything new happening each of these 22 times or whatever it is. But yeah, I think some people genuinely appreciate a sense of the actual pace of this thing, you know, and if you're thinking of doing it yourself, and maybe you're even thinking of doing it, you know, some of you might have an idea that you want to do this stuff for a living. Something like this can give you a really clear idea of the amount of time someone like me puts into it, and you know, it really helps when you're trying to work out, well, how many of those could I do a week or a day or a month, or how many would I be likely to get on, and also how many would I like to do. You know, looking at what goes on here, at what point would you get bored of it? At what point would you want to cut corners and just go, oh, for God's sakes, just shove them in, you know? Because when I started doing this, that was, you know, one of the things I thought about was, it was quite easy to do because compared to a corporate work that I was doing before, I mean, the pay rate of that was humongous compared to this. I probably earned in a day doing that kind of work. Well, when I worked for myself, I'd earn in a day, corporate work, I'd earn at least 10 times more per day than I could probably earn, or would typically earn doing guitars. Easily 10 times more per day. So you can see that it's a massive difference. But you know, when I started doing this, I realised that if I was going to do this all the time, I had to branch out and do different things along with the guitars, hence ebook and different kinds of setups, and making some of my own in my spare time, and so on and so on. But one of the important ones, and I guess it would be for you too if you were thinking of doing this, is the question I asked myself, which was how long would it take if I had to do 5 setups at least a week to even break even, probably more with other things, you know, how long, how many weeks, how many months even would it be before I just got sick and tired of it? And when I started doing this, that was a very real question for me, and I genuinely didn't know the answer at the time. You know, because you start out and you just think, wow, it's quite daunting, because you think, well, you know, I'm kicking this off, I'm putting my name to this, I'm calling it Real Love Guitars, and you know, I'm saying, here, look, I'm doing this, come along and see, send me your guitar, whatever. And then you suddenly think to yourself, yeah, but I don't even know that in 3 months' time I might suddenly get so sick to the back teeth of it that I just never want to do it again. And it was a very real question that I didn't have an answer to when I started. And it could have been, you know, it could easily have been I got 2 months into doing it and thought, God, I don't ever want to see a fretboard again, or I am so tired of cutting up masking tape and sticking it onto that neck, or oh God, here goes the micro mesh again, you know. And I think I was probably more surprised than anyone that, you know, 60 guitars into it or something, I was thinking, yeah, it's okay, I'm not bored yet. It was a surprise. and then 160 in. It's like, wow, okay. And now probably, I don't know, close to 400 or something, 500 nearly, all told, given the ones I've done twice or 3 times in a row. But loads, and still, there's something about taking someone's guitar and putting a beautiful brand new set of jumbo frets on, and then taking those little edges off, and then finally sitting down and just tailoring the edges with the files, and then putting some strings on, and then doing a bit of fine fret leveling, and then coming out with a guitar that just feels so much better. And in the words, I'm hoping, in Alex's words, kind of go from the annoying guitar that he described to me, to quote him, to one that's awesome and that he just won't want to put down. So, and that's an incredibly tangible thing. So there's nothing, I have to say, nothing even in the world of corporate stuff that came anywhere close to knowing that you've done that and hearing somebody tell you that they can't put down the guitar. It's not like it changes the world, but then nor does an awful lot of stuff you do in the corporate world. Well, I did. And ultimately, the money isn't what matters in the end. Especially when you get to a certain age, and many of you who are in my target market, sorry to reduce you to that, but those in my target market are similar age to me, and people who are not necessarily just chasing money anymore. People with a bit of life experience and, dare I say it, a bit of humility and wisdom, and a lot of people our age looking at life and saying that's not enough to just chase money or to do things just for money. There's got to be some more satisfaction, and there's never, in my view, it's never too late to go and change what you're doing to something that satisfies you. Even if, I remember seeing this years ago on some, I don't know if it was a TV it's probably a TV program I saw somewhere, but they interviewed a street cleaner, and the street cleaner had his little trolley thing, and he said, he'd done loads of big high-powered jobs in his time, and none of them came even close to the satisfaction he feels when he gets to the end of the street and sees that beautiful tidy street behind him that he's done. And it doesn't matter that it's going to be filthy again the next day because all the teenagers and whatnot and careless people have chucked stuff everywhere. It matters that it's tangible and gave him a great sense of personal satisfaction to make a difference in a way that was immediate and tangible. That's the only word for it, really. And I think that for me, that's why of all the things, actually, fretting a neck is probably the most tangible thing, because I can see straight away it's gone from being worn out and tired to kind of full of potential and renewed. It's a kind of a guitar sort of immortality in a way, that this thing, if I do it right, this thing has every reason why this thing can bring pleasure to somebody for another 20, 30 years. And I suppose for a lot of my customers, and I don't presume to know Alex's age, but for a lot of people who come to me, that's going to be beyond the time that some of us are here, which is a funny thought. The guitars that I'm setting up here now will very likely be inherited by one of your children, a part of you that's special. So that's quite something too. And I don't remember ever getting that in the corporate world. Everyone's sort of just, or too many of us in the corporate world, or people in the corporate world, too many people just got kind of get into expecting to do very little meaningful and get paid a lot. It's quite weird. It's just the way it all runs. And then, you know, I think sometimes you have to do something else with your hands, or something that's simpler or more immediate, to kind of stand as a contrast, so that you go, I'm not really getting paid that much for just turning up and going, oh. That's often what it is. It's certainly in my world. I mean, yeah, I produced some hard copy things, but most of the time it was, and I'm not knocking, you know, it's helping people do certain things, but ultimately, you know, it's just me in a kind of office environment, you know, talking with somebody who's running a company, trying to solve a problem or trying to get something done. And it's still, even in that environment, it's still kind of detached from the real world that they're doing stuff in. You know, whether it's insurance or banking or something, you know, it happens out there in the high street or something, but when you're working in the corporate world, you're still usually just mostly in the office environment, which I just think, personally, just isn't me at all. I think that's one of the things I really am most pleased about. I know this is only a small space and whatever, but I can stop, go and do something else. I can talk to Morris, I can go and have a cup of tea with Claire, think about anything else. And I don't know about you, but in the last year or two of my corporate, actually, before I became self-employed and did a bit of the corporate stuff myself, but in the last year working with the company I was working with in London, too much sitting in the office trying to find new business but passing time. That's a horrible, horrible thing. It's kind of anti-human, non-human, inhuman, sitting in offices. I know lots of people do, and I'm not criticising those people. It's just, it's not very human. It certainly wasn't for me. I need a bone nut to go in here. Anyway, so however long this has taken, this is how long I now take after having done a lot of them, and having all my sort of process all lined up, my kind of tuned to a familiar series of steps that don't catch me out ever. I know it's a touch wood kind of type of thing, but yeah. So it takes this long, and then we've got the. I'll show you. I'll take you through all of the bits of it because I've started, so I might as well finish. Might as well make Alex's neck, the one where you can see me do the beveling and so on. I always end up getting some glue stuck to me in this process, but the trick is to be aware of it and keep it off the neck, obviously. It's not too hard to do, but you just need to know that if you're using this glue, you will run the risk of getting it stuck. I had a brilliant idea once to blow away any overspill with compressed air, and I stood here and was shooting it away, and I thought, what a great way to clean up, because I didn't mind building up a load on the back of there, until I realised it had spat off the edge and then dribbled down the side of the neck, so I had to then spend time sanding that back and cleaning that up. Not ideal. Nice new frets. Better than a well set up guitar with brand new frets. Also jumbo ones, so it's gone up a size compared to what it felt like before. And these are Stumac's finest, highest, widest. I was kind of tempted for another. I was thinking about another guitar that I was going to refret, and I was tempted to think of getting some of that Jessica Evo gold frets that Daniel had on his Holdsworth Ibanez. His modified Holdsworth, I should say, because it was a bit odd because it had one of the horns chopped off, so some people watching the video quite rightly didn't recognise it and thought I must have been talking about something else. I must have identified it wrong, but it was that guitar, just let's do this differently. It was that guitar, just with a different shaped lower horn, which can be a bit off-putting. But anyway, they had these Jescar gold frets, which are apparently don't have any nickel in them. I don't know if they actually have any gold in them, but they have no nickel in them, so they're tougher steel than the regular frets. So, and I, having fret leveled them and polished them back up, I did notice they were a bit tougher. I remember thinking that the first few bits of the sanding process seemed to take longer to get rid of the scratches, which is fine if you know it's a bit harder. You can accommodate that. But yeah, it was nice looking stuff. I was thinking about whether I should get some and do this other guitar I'm about to re-fret. I'm currently lacquering in the house. Okay, so that's my last fret, a little bit of a clean up with some of this stuff, and then we're kind of almost ready to go into the beveling the edge. Now, I mean, that's another thing that's great about using super glue, even if it is a fairly permanent solution, is that it's good enough or fast enough to allow me to go straight into the beveling. It's not like it has to dry or harden or anything. It's ready to go. Now I'm going to take all of this used up stuff. Luckily my supermarket had a special deal on that kitchen paper. I bought 3 of those big fat rolls because I use an incredible amount of it. So there you go, there's my fret thing done. I'm just going to move this to here, put the lid on this. Still haven't heard from anybody why super glue climbs out of pots on its own without you doing anything. It's miraculous, but it does. So there's my fretting station ready to be turned round, turned back into a vise for cutting and stuff. So it's pretty handy. I don't know, I didn't think about it years ago when I put these two things, well, I did think about it, but I thought, well, I guess, when I put these two things on one lump of wood, because it turns out that they really work well together in that way. Okay, so there we have it. This is a fretted neck, and as you can probably see, sticking out bits of metal on the end there. So that's where we get this edge beveling beastie, and it is a frightening beast. The thing about this is, if this jumps up now, when I'm, first of all, this is going to be the surface that contacts the frets. Okay, as I run down here, beveling an angle onto the edge of this, and so this bit's going to touch the frets, the nice new frets that I spent loads of time and money putting in. However, that's flat and that's a curve, and the chances are this whole thing wants to run up and over. If it runs up and over, this merciless piece of steel with the sharpest corner on it on earth, which doesn't even, why does that even need to have, that could have a safe edge on there, that could, I should grind that. I will another time, but it can easily ride up across there, and before you know it, you've got a bunch of stripes scraped. I mean, stripes, it sounds too pleasant. You've got a massive bunch of gouges scraped across your brand new frets. Now, chances are we're going to fret level anyway, but to be honest, you could do without. It would be nice if you didn't have to. Imagine if we got this done and it played just as is, straight off. Wouldn't it be nice not to have to fret level? We could find that out once we set it up and so on. But if you scrape the hell out of it across the top with this thing, then you don't have a choice. You have to fret level to get rid of those scrapes. So the game with this is to use this in such a way that it's pressing downwards all the time. You can't afford to ease up so much that it can run the risk of skipping across this way. So the problem is, to make it work at all, you have to be pointing in at this angle, which has obviously a downward component and a sidewards component. And if you get it wrong and there's more sidewards than downwards, that's when you're going to scrape. So you can see I'm trying to get into the swing of this. I'm really concentrating on that corner to keep that action, keep that pressure in the downward, even possibly fractionally more on sideward. I would rather take a fraction longer, but didn't run the risk of skipping. And once in a while, I'm hoping, like this one, I get to do the whole lot without skipping. So I'm concentrating on the downward force more if I can than the sideways force. For all I know, there could be a kind of rail effect that you could build on here that stopped this falling over, but I've never yet come across one or way of doing it. So what I'm doing is I'm slowly wearing away this, both the kind of length that's sticking out, but also I'm doing it by taking a bevel at the same time. So, and like I said, it's just trying to keep it downwards. And you find that it's harder at the ends, so you have to really, well, at this end anyway, because obviously there's more frets together, so there's more of a mass of metal. You can see there's loads of nice shiny stuff coming off, but it hasn't touched any of the lacquer, which is great because it's not going to. So again, down force, and eventually it will start skipping across because it's got nothing to hit, nothing to cut. I'm not there yet. Nearly there. There's tons of metal here built up, but it's a nice finish. I mean, even that's quite smooth, but we're still got a bit to go, and I want it to stay downwards. Try and remember to keep my weight as much above it as possible. Still cutting. Hear it, it's just run free about that point there. A little bit more cut here. And we are done. So you can see there's a line of metal shards there. And that's one side done, and done without the risk of, without skipping. Thank heavens. I'll throw that on the floor. Get rid of some of that now. And you can see how lovely and smooth that is. I mean, that's a perfect edge. Sorry, it's kind of aerobic. It's nice and warm too. Now the thing about this is that actually that's quite sharp, even still. And if you were to kind of go and play that right now, you'd be worried about the sharpness. And it's quite interesting because you get a little tool next after I've done the other side, but you get your fret end files, and the first one is a concave file that, when kind of applied like this, very gently rounds, hardly any force, just rounds off the sharp cutting edge, but it's still actually quite sharp. Now I've learned that the trick is to stop there and not keep on cutting, because you actually can take quite a lot off and make this look messy. This little bit has taken off the cutting edge, and then when we come to finish it, probably do a bit of polishing if necessary. Even if it didn't, then I'd go down here with a couple of grades of sandpaper just to round off those little edges. So I've actually, as I say, the trick is less with that file than more. And I'm going to do the other side, and we'll keep the same crossed, fingers crossed, that I can get this all done without skipping. Now again, I've got to watch out here that, in fact, what you can do, what I can do, there's a, how I'm going to do it. What you don't want to do, thank you, is run off the end and clunk into here. And I've done it on my own guitar, believe it or not, my own Strat, Japanese JV Strat. So I don't need to come anywhere near this far down the neck. So I'm literally throwing a pile of tape around here to give me as much of a padding as I can in case I run off the end there. But it shouldn't. I should aim not to go anywhere near it. But I have been caught out in the past, and it has been ugly. Okay, so it's this end here can ram straight into the, if you're not careful, can sometimes hit the top end there. In fact, I don't think it can with this bevel, so I'm probably just being overcautious. It does when you have using it in square 90 degrees, then it can certainly can run into the edge here, whatever that bit's called. So I'm gonna, again, just gonna start slow and concentrate on the downward component. I start slow because all of these are uneven, and the last thing I want to do is ram this into one of these sticking out more than the other. And you can feel it clattering to begin with, which doesn't feel very, it's not hugely reassuring because you've just glued these in. You don't want to be bashing them and bending them sideways. So beginning by just letting it, let's just check for reassurance. Yeah, that runs right over the top, so I've got no worries. So again, concentrate on keeping that downward component as much as anything else here. See, it's still a bit uneven yet. Kind of remind yourself that it's not a rush. Repetition will get you there. Change around too much en route. I found that if you switch your grip, it's when you're liable to have a problem. That was catching backwards. So it's hard work and hard to keep control of it so you don't get that terrible skipping, because why, I mean, what a shame. I've done some sets of frets in the past and I've almost got to finishing them and they look fantastic, and everything about it tells me they're going to work without any fret leveling. Ta-da! Until I lose control of the tool, it skips. Get to learn the feel when it actually stops cutting and when it's still cutting. And believe it or not, it carries on cutting a lot longer than you think. or should I say a lot longer than you want, and you can tell because there's a kind of lip sticking out which is pretty sharp actually, so again it gets tiring. But you can see that because there's no curve on this, it's just, it can do anything it wants. So I think it's a pretty, in some ways it's a pretty bad design. Sorry G&W guys. I know there's a plastic one available, a resin looking nylon looking beast, but I have to say even that's flat too by the looks of it. My own words, come on. Nearly there. Lordy. You can see how much metal is coming off. Amazing how much these still take off. See, it starts to cut into that corner there a little bit. That's a slight danger. You can end up grinding that down too far. And on this end, it's hard because you have to put a bit of force right into the heel here. Otherwise you won't reach the bit you're trying to do. Okay, look at the muck on there, see that? But just looking down here it looks very, very good. There's a very nice set of frets. As darkness falls across the land, the midnight hour is close at hand. Oh, it's nice and warm too. Okay, so we are pretty much spot on. As I say, you get a little bit of wear occasionally right down in the corner there, which is no big deal. It's just where it kind of just cuts in on the end, but everything else feels absolutely lovely. Now what I tend to do for, well, I say I tend to do it, I don't have to do it, but I tend to just go down and skim the edge here, and that will pull off any little burr. Sometimes there's a tiny little thin burr overhanging, and I'll just get rid of it. And I can see that it polishes up the fret as I'm looking at it. Now I don't want to, I want to keep it this nice flat geometric sort of shape. So I'm only just doing it enough to scuff it up and take away, like I say, any little burr of metal that's caught on the edge. And make sure there's nothing overhanging. That's very nice. And then I do both sides, and then I'll just go around with that other tool, which will just kind of wrap over the sharp edges of the arch shape. And this looks very shiny. And I'm keeping it sort of in the light so I can see visually when it's been shined up. You don't mind this, I'm going to vacuum this up in a minute, but I'm just going to go over here, same thing. This tiny little bit of burr on there which has come up nice. Okay, so it's a very small amount, just backwards and forwards mostly. say, keeping it in the light tends to be good because you can really see the reflection as it just cuts the surface a little bit. Right, so that's nice and sharp, and then literally going a whole lot with this file here, kind of 3 swipes and that's it, but with almost no hand pressure on it. It's doing it just by virtue of passing by, and you can hear biting, and it's taking the very, very sharp, clean edge off the face of that fret end. Now let's go down the other side. The thing about this is it's a combination of skill and time. You know, you're going to get to be as fast, in inverted commas, as this from having done it enough times. So there's no kind of substitute from just doing it and practicing. And then, of course, in my setup price is included, sorry, my reed fret price is included the price of the full setup, which will involve as much fret leveling as is required to get the playing action that we set, which usually is a tiny little bit. Especially, I have to say, it's very, very rare to end up doing none. I think it's happened to me once. It's quite simple that the better the frets are seated and the better the fret job, the less we have to do in the fret leveling. But I would be very surprised not to have to do any to get the action I want. And I think what I'll do is I'll leave the setup till tomorrow. I'm not sure when the tuners will arrive. Okay, so that's my kind of rounding off. And what you can do as well, if you want to, is you can go and just take a tiny edge off. Sometimes I do with this file. Actually, you know what, on this one I'm not going to, because I like the clean look so much. I'm going to leave it just as is. It feels now actually good enough to play. There are no finger cutting bits that either on the edges of these frets or, very importantly, over the edge here. Because of the way it's done, they now look like they're short of the fingerboard, but they're not. They're just, there's a tiny bit of an edge to the fingerboard, and they kind of line up with that. Everything's looking darn good, I have to say. So I'm going to stop and go and get me something to eat, and I'm going to call that a successful fret job. Yeah, I like it. Da, 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 da. Jumbo frets, brand spanking new, on a bird's eye maple neck, all the way from Korea. Lush. I can feel it already, it's just different. Okay, see you in a bit. Hey, good afternoon, rainy afternoon. It must be winter, it's peeing down with rain. It's September, mid-September anyway, but it is horrible weather. But that aside, look what we've got. We've got the Lite Ash Telecaster, made in Korea, belonging to Alex, and here we have the refretted neck with the original tuners, and what I'm going to do right this second is lose the original string trees and put these new, what they're called, tusks on. Now these are both set to the same height as are actually the original string trees, so I'm going to go in at the same height with these, although we might look at shortening one later. Although the original ones on this Telecaster come with the same height on them as well. So I'm not going to use the same screws as are originally on there, because they're a bit stripped off. So I'm going to use these nicer looking new ones, so they're going to create a bit of a, they'll fit in the existing holes, but there'll be a little bit of extra bite on these, and I feel like they're just about look good. But there you go, we're going with white string trees on this little baby here because they're more in keeping. I've got another set of black ones for John's Telecaster, which is in the house, which has got a new bridge arrangement coming. Behind me I've got a Mighty Mite Telecaster, no, what language am I speaking? English. Strat neck, the one I got yesterday, and I've basically switched on my shed heating and put a wet towel over it. Now I'm cold as it is because it's horrible weather here, but it's also a double kind of whammy thing, because what I want is, I want the neck, it's clamped flat, and I just want to untwist the neck. It's got a tiny twist in it, and it's not that much, but it's just enough to want to tweak it. So I'm going to see if a bit of gentle warmth and, I don't know what that was, that was a cocktail stick, a little bit of gentle warmth and some moisture will help. And I don't want to roast it, I just want to gently moisten it up and then let it sort of settle a bit over time. So what I'm doing here is I'm just lightly, to begin with, fitting the Telecaster plate back on, or the neck back on. It's a really nice fit, this, it's very snug, everything feels quite precision-y. So I'm just going to put these in place first. That's quite interesting. That one's all the way in on a setting of 2, which isn't a lot. And there's a bit of a bend in it by the feel of it. And okay, so these top 2 are just a little bit more, require a bit more torque. I'm just going to kind of, before I tighten anything up, I'm just looking at where everything sits, making sure it sits where I want it, nothing untoward. Then I'm going to put a couple of turns onto my torqueometer and let this just bring it into alignment so that we get a nice snug fit. There we go. I'm not going to overstress this, that's fine. So here we have our freshly refretted neck back on the guitar, and this is the point of this now, is the refret is done, the mechanical part of it, but obviously the next bit of it now is, can we set this up now beautifully well, and in the setup can we add, do we need to do any fret leveling on these new frets? Now, well, proud though I am, as I am, of my fret refretting in this case, because actually it was a very nice, it feels like a very nice set of frets on a slightly irregular board. Proud though I am, I'm pretty much certain that it's going to need a tiny bit of fret leveling, as it always does. It's almost impossible. I mean, there's no shame in it needing it. The clearances, as you've heard me talk about many times before, they're so precise that it's almost impossible to put new frets in and for them to be set to the kind of minuscule tolerances that we deal with, or that we're playing with now. Somehow I didn't manage to straighten these out. I can't think for, why didn't I? Right, I'm going to go off for a second while I straighten out these strings so I can reuse them in sacrificial mode. They're going to get binned, but I need to be able to get them through the body. Actually, a push for this job, I could go through the back, but it still need. Do they need straightening? Well, let's have a look. For this particular job, the bridge that's fitted on here doesn't really care whether the strings come from the back or through the body. The only slight difference is the brake angle that you'll get from one way or another, but just for the sake of misery, let's come through the back for this part of the setup. Okay. It's a little bit, no, you know what, no. I'm going to go the whole hog, sorry. bear with me, back in a sec. Okay, so there we have it, restrung with the sacrificial strings. So I'm gonna sort of, right, I've gone through the string through body on this because that's how it is in real life. I'm just looking at the alignment of everything just right now. It's interesting how these things seat. Kind of splay a little bit, but as in their natural seating, it ends up kind of like this. I'm not gonna make any adjustment here. It could go 1/2 millimeter that way with a slight tweak of the neck, but I prefer the neck to sit exactly where it likes. So the point is there's enough room everywhere you look for what it's doing, rather than start cranking the neck in different directions. Okay, so this is the fun part of everything. We've got a first fret action which is currently miles high, so this is where it's sort of the order in which I do things changes a little bit. Because this nut is brand new and this action is sky high, I'm going to fret that on the first fret. Now I know that's not quite the same as fretting it on a properly set low nut, and I'm just looking right up here. The only fret that's anywhere near the edge is this one, and it's in place, and it could move. The whole lot could kind of move a little bit. There is room for movement, but if it's kind of technically balanced, that's sort of where it's happy being. Yeah, so I'm going to cut out this ultra high first fret at the moment. I'm going to put the capo on and I'm going to work the height off there. Now this is slightly lower than the final playing action will be, so I have to just recognise that that's the case, but it's not a big deal and it's not a huge amount of variation. Now I'm just looking at what I'm aiming for now. It's going to go for my favourite 1.5s and down to 1. I'm going to use my close-up glasses. It's a little bit more humid in here right now than humid than it ordinarily would be, because I'm doing this heating thing over there. Actually, this is just about almost spot on, except this is a little bit low now. Now the reason it's low now is, of course, we've got much taller frets in than were before. So that whereas the action was too high on the bass side before, it's just right now. But we also need to bring up this first fret action a little bit. Spot on 1 there, still under 1 there. So a little bit of adjustment to do. I want to be fractionally over 1 there, which I am. Here I want to be a little bit more than 1, which I'm not. So tiny. This is it's better to do it that way. Tiny tweak both sides. So we're going to go 1.2, 1.2, something like that, and this one needs to come up just a fraction. Following the 9.5 radius. So let's see what we've got. Just double check. We've got about 1.5. We've got 1.5, a tiny bit much. And the next one we've got just under, a tiny bit too much on that one. You can tend to sort of see, if you just eyeball it really, you can watch the gaps between them where they look too much or too little, and that looks kind of about right for now. Obviously now that's out of tune again, so I'm going to go back to my reference note. Still going to get some slack in here because I've only just put these old strings back on. Now this is unplayable at the moment because it's way too high, certainly at the nut end. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the capo back on, and I'm just going to do a check on what the neck relief is on this thing right now. So that isn't too bad. That's about 0.3, something like that, and I can check with this if I want to. Metrics 0.2, 0.25, 0.3. Let's just have a feel. Again, I'm pretty sure probably it's a bit higher than that actually. 0.4 something. I should have possibly put my specs on for this game. So we got we got 9s on here. Ow! And what we can do is we can just dial out a tiny bit of this curvature if we can. With a bit of tightness. Now I seem to remember this neck having not a lot of room for tightening. It was quite curved to begin with, so we may not, with 9s, oh sorry, I mean 9s isn't particularly heavy load, but we may not be able to reduce this action very much, which would be a pity in a way, because I want to get it exactly right. That's the wrong one. Yeah, we may be constrained. Yeah, it's quite tight, but I'll do a quarter of a turn there and let it settle, and then we'll just see what happens to it over a little short period of time. Yeah, that's made a difference. I quite like that. Let's see. Look at that fretting. Okay, tiny little adjustments to make. Didn't really expect to get it down to a capo style action without having to do a tiny bit of adjustment on the frets, really. Okay, so while I'm thinking of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a set. Now it's interesting, this has got 9s on, but I want to go higher, bigger, more than 9s. The only problem is I haven't got to hand a number with 9s on, so I'm going to just dial up and see. Excuse me. I'm going to re-fire up my phone, and you might get horrible noises, but I just want to get a set of gauge of 10s, because I want to set the slots on this for 10s, or above 10s actually. What am I looking for? I'm looking for roto, let's say roto sound 10s. Okay. Yikes. 4 people dead after crash. Sorry if this is making interference. I'm just going to write this down. Here we go. 10, 13, 17. 10, 13, 17. 26, 36, 46. 26, 36, 46. Okay, and I'm going to switch this off again so you don't get interfered. Yeah, the news told me 4 people dead and crashed somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a series of things that work for that. So for a 10 I'm going to go 13, for a 13 I'm going to go 17, and so on and so on. So 13, 17, and a 17 I'm going to go 24, if I can find it. 24, 24. Could do with a few more of these to have a complete range to suit every mood. 26, I'm going to go 32, as you see here somewhere, 36, 32, 32, from 36 I'm going to go 42, which is also here somewhere, this last one, 36, and a 46 I'm going to go 48, but I need a bit of widening on that one, so I need a 42 next please, 46, 36, 17, 42. Right, so there's my oversized 10 set, and that's how I like to do it. Now this will guarantee that a 9 set will fit nicely, but it will also mean that a 10 set should fit comfortably too. Potentially an 11s, possibly. But one of the things, as you may have heard me say over many setups if you watch my stuff, is that getting that clearance is the most important thing of all. The nut slot is so critical, and you can see here that we've got a very high, well you might be able to see, we've got a very high action to begin with, Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with a combination of two tools for this. This file first for kind of making major cut downs and making sure there's a notch, so it's not, when I start working with the actual file, it's not going to kind of grip it in a deep trench, which is a bit of a pain. So I'm going to drop off my lower two, lose a fingernail in the process as always. And I'm going to work with this nice bone nut. I'm going to go for a 0.3 action. Now it's way above it to begin with. So rather than just go straight down with this thing, I'm going to start with going down with this V notch file. And again, you can see first of all I'm tilting backwards because I want to maintain this backwards slope all the time. And I'm making sort of a grand clearance first with that, and then I'm going to go back in with this 32, which, as you heard me say, is kind of, it's 6/1000th of an inch above the actual gauge that I'm fitting on there, which is absolutely fine. So again, I'm just going to increase that clearance and then measure. And so I'm going to just keep on doing this until I get to the point where the string just buzzes, starts to buzz on the feeler gauge. Now anybody with understanding of this will know that if I set for a 0.3 action there with the neck tilting back under gravity, then it's going to, that gap is going to increase as I put this into this position. So you can see it's kind of, as far as I'm concerned, that dynamic, people say, oh, you can't do it lying down, you've got to do it sitting up. I don't care about the 0.3, you have to remember this. I care about a good playing action at the first fret. So if by the time I've done it to 0.3 and then stood it up and it's now 0.336.5, I don't really give a toot. All I care is I know that using a 0.3 on its back gives me the action I want. So please, any of you watching this who think, hey, you're doing it wrong, I've got to get on to YouTube and tell him you're doing it wrong because it's lying on its back and there's gravity and he's an idiot because he doesn't know there is gravity. Of course I know there's gravity. All I'm saying is you just know, as long as you know what's going on and what is at play, you know what you're doing. And please don't get obsessed with the numbers for their own sake. My setup, which many people have enjoyed and continue to enjoy, is based around what I do here. I don't care what the numbers are. Once I've got the action that I and my customers like, the action could be 4 cream pies for all I care, or 72 butterflies, right? It doesn't matter. They are not an end in and of themselves, they are means to an end. And there we have it. That's the kind of bottom line. I know I always chicken out actually on my first cut. That's very close to the absolute point I want to be. And at that point I just, last little dusting, drop it in. It's just where I want it. Boot! That's going to be as light as a feather. Ooh. Yeah, massive difference between the two, but I can already see it's working the way I want. Now, the other thing to remember is, of course, by the time I finish this, there's going to be some pretty deep slots on here, because more than most guitars, I set a very low action here at the first fret, and you can see that's going to leave a lot of nut material above the slots that we don't need, and it's ugly. So what I can promise you I'm going to do at the end of this, excuse me, once we've got the frets off, and no, not the strings off, and we're getting ready to polish up the frets if we've done fret leveling, which we probably will do a tiny bit of to make it play perfectly. While we're strings akimbo, then what we'll do is we'll take the excess material off here with my friend the Dremel, or a file, whichever you want to use, but I use the Dremel with a sanding disc on it, or sanding drum I should say. And that just means we can get a nice low, sort of elegant, low profile nut with this lovely low action. We don't need any material above this, above the kind of basic semicircle of the slot. We do not need, and it's superfluous and it just looks ugly, so we'll take it away in a decisive manoeuvre. Okay, so I'm now getting the A down to where I want it, nearly there, a little tiny bit more, and this is where you've got to be as sort of careful as you like. You don't want to overcut, because you'll be in sort of rescue territory, you know, needing to fill the nut or replace it altogether if something goes wrong. And for those of you who've seen lots of my videos before, you kind of know that I'm a bone fan. And the reason I'm a bone fan, there we are, the reason I'm a bone fan is because it's in my experience, it cuts the most dependably and the most consistently of all the different substances. And to be honest, when I'm down at this sort of level, cutting this sort of clearances, I want dependability more than anything. I want the thing to behave itself and do what I expect time and time again. So I'm just now kind of putting some depth into this with the jeweler's file. This will run much quicker down to sort of close to where you want to be to begin with, and remember, any of this notch that you don't like the look of, the notch will be removed when we come to sanding all that excess stuff off. Now I'm working with a 48 here, which is only 0.002 of an inch above my actual gauge for the 10 set, the E on a 10 set. So technically speaking, that's too close to the actual gauge for my liking. One of the things about the Strat or the Tele nut, which we're looking at here, is that it's quite a bit more forgiving in terms of not crimping strings. The reason for that is because it's a thinner. It's about only half to 2/3 the width of some Les Paul nuts. So the longer the slot you're cutting, the more chance of microscopic wiggles you're going to build in, especially when these things are actually already slightly kinked. They will be from kind of the first use onwards. In a Les Paul nut, that slight kinking will lead very quickly to, or will quickly disappear, all the clearance that you think you've cleverly built in by doing what I'm doing, which is using a slightly oversized set. That clearance will be disappeared by the kinking of the slot itself, which means you might well have used a 6 thou oversized and thinking you've got yourself loads of comfortable clearance, but in a Les Paul slot, quite mysteriously, you can suddenly find that your string's still pinging and sticking in the slots, and that's because of that kinking, turning shape of the slot. Which is why, having done all this oversized, you'll probably still see me having to do some work with, I wouldn't be surprised to end up doing a tiny bit of work with sandpaper and a blade, just to make sure the width on the slots is good enough. And that's, seems a bit crazy, but it's absolutely worth doing to ensure that you've got the smoothest, freest running nut on the planet, because therein lies the secret of your tuning stability, which frankly is the only thing, or not the only thing, it's the first of many things that matter on your guitar. The rest, if you haven't got tuning stability, the rest might as well be Chinese junk. No offense to Chinese, but it might as well be just crap, because you can have all the best stuff in the world, but if your guitar will not stay in tune, you might as well forget it. And I'm going to turn this off now before I steam to death. let it settle a bit. So again, a lot of the, the experience of how far to go with this particular file is just that, a matter of lived experience. And then when I get anywhere close to it, I switch out to the 24 that I'm using for this. And again, you can see I'm trying to move it a little past the curvy, kinked bit. I want to use the flat bit, and if I could snap this off cleanly without incurring a sort of bend at the end, I probably would, because it's at that time in life now where getting access to unworn teeth without any sort of bend in there is a real bonus. But unfortunately the thin ones snap cleanly, but these from here onwards don't. So I can't have what I want unless I had some sort of huge great cutters of some sort. We are on the ball right there. So now what we're looking at is a slightly big high nut, but we're looking at an absolutely light as a feather action over that first fret, courtesy of this careful and precise adjustment. If you try this for the first time, or for example if you're one of those very sensible people who's bought my ebook and you're going to do this, I always recommend, there are a number of get out of jail options if you overcut the slots, and I recommend, they range from simple as using the super glue and bicarbonate of soda temporary fill and recut trick, which is very effective actually, right through to having a spare nut standing by that you can knock this one off if you've really blown it, and a few stages in between. And I show a few of those in detail in my fabulous ebook on sale at all good Facebook pages near you. But yeah, the other way I think about it is, if you're going to do this, the improvement is so huge you'd be mad not to learn it. And if you're worried, just have a couple of spare bone nuts for different guitars you're trying on lined up ready to go, and it will certainly repay you. Chances are you'll get the job done without needing the spares, but it's really nice to know that at worst comes to worst you can just knock that one, or gently loosen that one up and pull it out and replace it with another one and learn again, make all the mistakes all over again. But I honestly don't imagine you will even mess it up that badly, but it gives you this peace of mind, maybe fortifies you to carry on and try it. Okay, so I'm on the 13, which is the highest of my, or smallest of my files, and again it's oversized for the 9s we're actually using, but it's so this is going to be a 9, so we're using a 13, and that's not point anything, it's 4/1000th of an inch oversized, but because of the things I've already mentioned, chances are we will still expect, or I will still anticipate, pinging and sticking, and I will be, throughout the rest of the setup process, one of the key things I'll be doing is listening very carefully, or feeling very carefully out, listening and feeling for there's telltale pings which will tell me which slots are still gripping, and we take care of that with sandpaper. Now, here is the magic begins. Yes, magic, I told you it was magic. Now I'm just going to give these a bit of a pull, and then we're going to just tune once again off the reference. This thing is amazing. It'll play and stay on 48 hours without batteries running out. Ooh, yeah. Wow, that's amazingly low. That's a superb action already. Okay, take my iron gear pickup plectrum thing. What I'm going to do with this is here's what I do with some plectra that I get. And I get me a bit of this here 220, and I was gonna draw around if I can. How am I going to do it? That's a good question. How am I going to do it? I'm going to get me a line. This isn't going to be the right pen. This may be more productive, or it may not. Draw me a line, and then I'm going to draw me half a shape twice. And I'm going to cut me those two shapes out like that, and I'm going to use them to cut me a custom made bit of sandpaper. It would do, but I don't have, I haven't got, have I got real scissors here? I had. Watch this. They'll be hanging up there, won't they? Yes. Wow. So, sandpaper, sticky back, used for the fret leveling thing known as the banana. I'm going to cut me 2 bits of this off, and I'm going to stick these beauties to this otherwise fairly anonymous white plectrum for the purpose of making it actually grippable, because in my experience these things, I find them quite hard to hold. So I'm just try to cut to the inside of the line a bit, but even that's not that important, as long as it's the shape that matters. Get me a blade, pull off the backing. There's a little detour for fun. Pull off the backing, put it over the top here. Yay. Ooh. I'm sorry about that, iron gear. I didn't mean to blank out your brand. It's nothing against the brand at all. It's just I wanted some grip. There's one side, and I can do me the other. So it's quite a cute way of making very grippy and nice to hold plectrums. Obviously you avoid sandpaper around the bit that you hit with, because you'll just scrape the living daylights out of your strings that way, which you don't really want to do. Okay, so this was just a little detour before I get into the serious business of fret leveling this Lite Ash Telly. There you go. Yeah, easy to hold. Love it. Sorry about all the coughing. I haven't quite recovered from this horrible cold I had recently. I did check with the doctor and I said, "Doctor, is it 2 weeks after, or should I still have a cough?" And they said, "Yeah, it's fine. You're not going to die." I hope. So, with my new, oh, it's so easy to hold. Well, I have to say, as a fretter, that's very good. A couple of little areas. Right, well, the bottom line is, there are a tiny, it's remarkably good, and much as I would love to say, hey, it doesn't need any fret leveling at all, I'm not going to say that, because I want it perfect, right? And the customer has paid for it to be the absolute best I can do, and that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slack off these here what's-its strings, and I'm going to extremely carefully mark up the frets, and I'm going to do it with great precision and care, so that not any chance of slipping off onto the maple. If you haven't done this before, or if you don't trust yourself, then I recommend you don't do it. Before sticking some masking tape onto your frets in the time-honoured fashion that I show in my ebook. It's cheesy advertising, but or you can see on any one of my videos where I actually show it. Most of the time I stop the camera at that point because it's really boring for people to watch. Not that this isn't, but anyway. So what I'm doing is I'm prepping this for fret leveling. Now don't forget, we're going to take down the nut later on. I want it at pitch. And I want these strings to last that long that I can do it. So please, string gods, treat me well for a moment. Let me just slack you off and put you on once more so that we can get this bit done. Okay, just give myself a bit of room. And then the same on the other side. So I'm going to use my 200 grit U-channel truss rod again, and John, who was here with me on Tuesday while I did his Reverend Manta Ray, and you heard me kind of, well, explain, I suppose, why I used that one over the other one I often use, which is a thinner but less stiff one. So the U-channel one I like because it keeps its shape slightly better, and it gives, I think, just slightly more accurate performance. But excuse me, slightly more accurate, but it has one downside in that it doesn't like to flatten out completely. So if I start off now, and what we notice is there's the what do you call it, the relief on this is too flat for this tool. I'll revert to the other one, but we'll start here and see. So it's at its loosest at the moment, and I'll just get my little feet going on here, and we'll get ready to calibrate. So straight away, that's good because I need to put some curve in this. So that's the first thing I can be confident. It's more, the neck is more curved than this thing is on, only fractionally. This has an inherent curve. I don't want to go putting it in a vise and bending it. I'd rather kind of leave it in its natural state. And that's, now what I'm finding is that's just slightly over over curved, and this is so small, the adjustment to match is so tiny. I'm just going to do a couple more feels. Now, you know what, with this I'm going to go to my other one. It's got 400 grit on as well, so it's very delicate, and this one is it's thinner as well, so it's more accurate in that it's doing much finer slices. So this one already starts out by needing a bit more of a tilt into it. It's as I say, they're both good. This one's now spot on, so I'm happy with that. I may have to take the risk of straightening out that other one, because if I can't use it on really low neck reliefs, then there's not much point. Okay, so here we go. Now, this is what I do. I let the tool go backwards and forwards, mostly entirely under gravity, and then I'm just going to run it backwards and forwards in this, what I call the E track, and then I'm going to stop, and then use the cutting as a way of evaluating what's happening. And the first thing I can see is it's cutting a bit here, a bit in the middle, and a bit at the end. So that tells me that I've got the calibration of the tool correct, because it wouldn't be doing that if the tool was too bent or too straight for this neck. And what I mean by calibration is that the tool is currently mimicking the curve in this neck exactly by virtue of those three little feet and the miracles of maths and science. So in terms of frets, that's cutting hardly, a little tiny bit, none, some, tiny bit, none, tiny bit, none, some, bit more. So that is a really good diagnostic indicator. It says it's calibrated correctly, and the stuff that's been taken away is the stuff that needs to be taken away. Got a little bit more at that top end really, but you can hear that we're almost there. That's a 1mm action on the Telecaster, okay? So we are almost there, and this beautiful, elegant method is going to just take away whatever needs to go to give us that clear sounding notes. Now the great thing about this method, apart from there's a lot of good things about this method, one of them is that it's leveling with the effects of compression already at play in the neck, which other methods don't do. But the other great great advantage of this method, as you can tell, is that I can stop just play every note that I want, make it play, and hear it when it's ready to move on. And there we are. That's everything playing at 1mm in the E track, which is a beautiful action for a 13-year-old Telecaster refretted. So hardly, I mean, I'm very pleased with the fretting, because it's telling me it's very precise and very good set of frets, and I'm really just making tiny adjustments with this 220 grit paper, and I can see it's cutting these top ones a little bit more than the others. A little bit more at this top end on the B track. And once that's done, then I'm going to recalibrate before I do the G track, and so on and so on, and recalibrating each time I move across to a new track, because the neck relief actually changes a little bit as you go across. Not quite sure why, just differences in the profile of the neck, or the way the neck behaves, that's all. So I can see that it's taking a little bit more off these top frets, so it's making sure that those notes right at the top play. Oh well. Now as you drag across on a 9.5 radius, the challenge of the levelness is not just getting the notes to play individually, but as you drag across into the next across onto if you like, the G track, or whatever the next track is, whether or not you can get bends out of it. Now on a 7.5 radius, with sort of classic vintage Fender radius, you basically have to accept that you aren't going to get, at a low action, you just will not get bends, large bends. It's just the nature, the geometry of the curvature. It's too tight a curve to bend your strings up and round and expect to retain the clearance, the tiny amount, but nonetheless the clearance necessary on a low action. And the lower the action, the lower that available clearance is for riding up that hill on the fret when you bend a note, and it cuts down the available remaining clearance. So on a 7.25, very difficult to get any bends on a light action, low action, sorry. What you're seeing there is on the similar thing applies on the 9.5. It's still quite a challenge to get a very low action. That's perfect. So we conk out after a while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recalibrate one again, track number 1, and I'm just going to try for a little bit more bend before I am forced to just fractionally, and I mean fractionally, we're talking possibly even 20ths of a millimetre, before I feel I need to raise up the action to enable the bigger bends out of that top E. But I'd like to be able to do it without that, but you never really know. It's difficult to know. So these are brand new frets, so I can afford to level as much as I like, really, if I'm aiming for this precision to get these bends to work, but we shall see. That's my top E, and I'll just redo the B as well, using the same calibration, I should say. The reason I do is because I usually calibrate north, that side of the string, and of course I can't do that for the top E. So basically, if I stick to the same kind of approach, the B and the E have to share the same calibration. So I'm just concentrating a lot on this end, hardly using any more pressure, but it's making more of a cut at that end. Right, that's nice. So we kind of choke out after a tone on that. So it excuse me, it could be the B. I'm just going to check the level of the overall position and the height of the E. Anything else happens. Okay, we're dead on 1mm, which is what I like. So that clearance decreases as we push up the hill on this fret, and then it goes back down to its saddle position there, and that's a kind of geometry governed by the millimeter height and the curvature of the radius of the frets. It's trying to climb up that hill, and it's really difficult. Well, I can see it sort of gives you a clue where it may be that it's just running out of room. And I'll just get my banana tool, as I like to call it, once more back into this B channel. But if I can't get this to just level out enough to play those bends the way I want them, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a tiny fractional adjustment to the action to make it work. It's sort of surprising how little you need to adjust the action to get it to work. So, where's my adjuster gone? Yeah, oops. So you see this here, I'll take, for example, I'll take a half a turn. Now the half a turn translates into, you can't even see the difference, it's just fractionally over a millimeter. I'm getting filthy fingers now. So eventually on this radius it runs out, and the bottom line is there is a physical impossibility. Beyond this, it's a diminishing returns game to try and level any further than this. So I'm not going to bother. I'm going to leave that where it is. But as I say, on on a 9.5 or even worse, a 7.25 radius, you just can't go below a certain point, I'm afraid, or you can't go below a certain action and still get the bends you want. It's just the geometry of the curve, really. It took me a while to kind of realise why that was, and I used to feel, whenever I worked on guitars like that, I used to feel kind of defeated because I couldn't get it to where I wanted it. But then when you sort of draw it out in 3 dimensions and you see what the string has to do to kind of come to be pushed up the hill from its start point there to its anchor point there, those two are at a set, if you like, vertical elevation, but you push the middle part up this hill, basically, which is reducing the clearance as you go to the strings that it then touches on its way back down to its anchor point. And it's a bit of a dizzying sort of 3D geometry to have to think of, but when you do, you can sort of start to understand why the tighter the radius, the fewer large bends are possible. So the point is, with this, you could have just cranked the action up, and called it a day, because then it will play those bends all day long, and ultimately, if that's important, then we have to go a little bit back up to get those bends, but c'est la vie, unfortunately. Now this needs a little bit more curvature in it on this D track. Yeah, that's good. Just for interest's sake, we'll just play that one through. Pretty good, except there's a little bit of very slight buzzing at the top there, along with some of the others, so this will be fairly quick to tighten up. It's funny, it's always obviously the strings you bend most at the top, the B, the G, or G, the B and the E, they're the kind of ones you tend to bend in your lead guitar playing more than anything else, and so as a result they're the ones that will sort of run out of room courtesy of the radius, the radii. That'll do. And then we move across and recalibrate for the A and then the low E, and then we're done. And we'll just get this then polished out and nut reshaped and so on and so on. That's a little bit, see, that one now comes back down a little bit, slightly over curved. Now we are spot on again. See, little tiny variations in the fingerboard, really, probably more than the curve, and that's something we know. I've already said about this guitar, it has some strange, slightly uneven things going on in the fingerboard. I realise my stomach's rumbling because I'm hungry. Says that, stomach rumbles. Okay. So again, it looks like you're making some. I'm making some dust here, which is no problem. We'll clean it up. A little bit more at the top there, and it's interesting. There's kind of degrees. It's certainly not choked off. It's not even buzzing. It's kind of another state that I've kind of worked with a lot, and it's just, if anything, you can just feel it slightly unresonant or something. It's about the only way I can describe it. Like that. let's see what we've actually got there as a height. Just double check that. We are a bit low, by the way. No wonder it's doing that. Let's just double check. It should be closer to 1.5, which it is now. That's 1 point, that's just under. Tuning will obviously, there you go, that's why, it was just a fraction too low. A couple little spots there. We'll get that on and we should be alright. So you can see, well I can see from here, it's cut, it's cut metal on most of the frets now, so we haven't left anything untouched, and it's all predictable. It's all doing what I kind of imagine it should do. There's a couple of little clusters right at the end here. Well, there's a bit right at the end where it's a little, the fret's just sitting a little tiny bit higher than everywhere else, and so this is now bringing those back down. Like I said, the constrictions on the bends are probably, I know they're more to do with the radius and the geometry of that radius and the limits it imposes on us than anything else. We just have to live with it. And let's get it in tune for a second with my filthy fingers. It's incredible. That is so low. There is the cost. Okay, I'm happy with that. We'll just make tiny adjustments to get that bend to where we want it, but that's going to have to be by playing action, not by fret leveling, because we just have to accept the limits that are imposed on us by the radius. No. Yeah, the radius, that's the word. So I'm just going to get ready to clean off this fretboard. So, okay, the fun part is those strings are done, so we can now release them. I'm just going to put all these straight for a second, give me some clearance. I'm going to get rid of these strings now. They've done great service, but they're going in the bin. And we're now getting ready for the really fun part, which is to take down the excess material off the nut, which is nice, make that look tidy. We're going to mask off, clean up the fingerboard a little bit, get the dust out of the way, and then mask it off and get into re-crowning or reprofiling those frets that we've levelled, and then polish them all out and make them sort of play ready, nice and shiny. And then we're kind of ready to head for the final setup, restring and setup, and then do some intonation. I'll just put these ends here for a minute. So you can see, as I'm doing this, you can see the dust, fret dust that's built up on this guitar, which is quite normal when you're doing fret leveling. And you know, one of the luxuries of doing jumbo frets, of course, is that you've got plenty of room, plenty of material to play with, so you don't have to be too cagey or panicky about you know, am I going to run out of fret material in an instant. Of course, with vintage stuff you have to be much more conscious of that. But the nice thing about this method is that it removes only as much as you need to get to the playing action that you want. Now if it's a very low playing action, obviously, as we're doing here, it can be more on another day when you're not aiming for such a low action. Okay, now I'm only going to wipe my hands a little bit with this stuff right now. I don't want to chuck that all over the fingerboard just yet, because blowing the stuff off with air is probably more effective just now than giving it a good clean up. I'll do that at the end when I've got marker pen residue to clean up as well. Right, let's turn this amp off. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mask this off first. Now, normally on a rosewood guitar, rosewood necked guitar, I quite often will do the next stage, which is the re-profiling or re-crowning of the frets. So I take the flattened spots I've just made and kind of turn them back into nice arch-shaped frets like the way they are when they're new. And we'll do that, but I'm going to just mask this off first because it's a nice bird's eye maple, and what I don't want is to be scratching up anything or marking anything as I go through this next bit at all. So I might as well mark it up, mask it up right now so that it stays out of harm's way. And this is obviously going to take a little bit of time to start out with the full thickness tape like this, and then obviously you can see very quickly I'm going to run out of room and I'm going to need to switch back to, or cut some strips especially, which I've done hundreds of times before now, but I'll save you the boredom of it because it involves me and a board and 20 minutes of slicing. No, it's not that bad, but it's all there in my ebook if you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang this safely out of the way. It's not getting steamed because the fire is off at the moment, and I'm going to just cut some strips in the end. So this is my sanding thing, but there's not enough tape on here to hold this down, unfortunately. I need some more gaffer tape. Anyway, see you in a minute when it's all taped up and I'm ready to go. Hey, here we go again. Okay, magically, frets marked up. We get the jumbo side of the StewMac re-crowning file. Before I do that, I'm going to do this. So I can find the right thing, which I can. It's here. I'm going to give this little nut a bit of a go. Little nut. Right. Stand by for noise. Wow. Boy, did bones stink or what? So you can see, taking down the spare material, a little bit more to go, and then with a file I just want to round off the front edge of there so it doesn't catch on the fingers. I'm not going to do it with this. 1 second, nearly there. Right, you notice how carefully I did that with 2 hands. You've got to retain absolute control over that, but looks nice. Very good. Right, sorry about that, bit of noise, but there you go. Reshaping taking off most of the excess material off the top of the nut. And while I've got the paper on here, masking tape, I'm going to just gently try and, we're using the soft edge onto the downwards on the fingerboard. I'm just going to excuse me, take off any of the sharp edges of this, just so it's nice and smooth to play. Okay, lovely jubbly. Okay, so now it's time to get the jumbo side of the fret re-crowning file, and I'm aiming to just take off the sharp shoulders of the flattened parts of the frets. So some parts have to work out a little bit, some parts are already kind of done. The aim here is to leave that little black strip of marker pen down the center, so that I can, if I can get the end with some black marker all the way down the middle of all of these frets, then I know that I haven't touched the tops of them, and that means their relative levelness, which is very important because we just struggled to get it. That relative levelness is maintained, preserved. So just looking, some of them hardly need any, they're barely touched by the fret leveling process, and where they don't I just move on, and where they do I just spend a little bit more time. That's looking good. Same there. So hardly any of them need that much at all. Maybe a couple more at this end, I know already, that are slightly flattened, but all of them are looking good. And we should start to see a couple show up here, a bit there. That's okay. A bit on the end there, a bit in the middle, a bit at the start, and a bit on this side, and then a chunk in the middle here. So it doesn't take long using this tool, and it's not a cheap tool, but you can see it's very effective for doing a speedy job. Okay, so now we've got the nut reshaped. If we want to, if you want to, I want to, if it's not quite the shape I want it to be, then it's easy enough to get a little block and a bit of extra, a bit of sandpaper. This is, I'm just going to use some 120 here. Just going to wrap it round for a second, make a little controllable block, and you can just go over it like this, but it's much more controllable than using a big file. Avoid the edges. Just smooth it off a little bit, and again you can see I'm using my finger just to kind of prevent it going where I don't want it to go, and this is leaving a nice relatively smooth finish, also preserving the gaps of the slots nicely there. They're still really nice and deep, but they're not too deep. Okay, so let's just reconnect. We've got the height set where we want. Pickups not necessarily yet. This one's kind of fixed below the pickguard. We may not get to adjust that, or we could take the pickguard off and adjust it. This one can come up and down. We've got the neck relieved the way we want. We've got the nut now set perfectly. First fret action set perfectly. So the next stage now is to polish out the frets. To do this I'm going to use my traditional approach, which has worked now for quite some time. So I'm going to go 600 grit to 1000 to 1500. These aren't precise, or they don't, there's nothing special about the gradations I'm using. It's just something that, as a force thing of habit for me, it's worked, and so I kind of repeat it, stick to it. But you could do 800, 400, 800, 1200, 1800, it doesn't really matter, whichever you feel comfortable using. I'm going to do 2 of the 6, 2 of the 1000, 2 of the 1500, and that will be it for the paper side of things. And then I'm going to switch to the micro mesh sets and go from there. I'll clip this up here actually for use with the next one, which I'll do later, early this week. And then I've got a foam block and some micro mesh pads. Sorry, now I've got bone dust in the nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through First one I do by hand, and then I'm going to go through all these papers until this is polished up, beautifully shiny. I'm going to go off camera to do that because it's very boring and noisy, and then I can also listen to the radio in the meantime. Once I've done that, I'm going to take off all this paper, give this a clean over, and then we're ready to actually I'm going to stop at that point. I'll just come back on just to show you how it looks, but I'm going to stop because I'm going to wait then until the new tuners come. And once the new tuners come, I'll figure out how they fit on, whether, because we might have to fill some little holes here from the Fender ones, but other than that we'll get the new tuners on, and that will be time to restring and then finally set the intonation, which is looking wrong at the moment. Just as a pattern, those of you kind of got used to seeing intonation spreads, that really should look kind of first one forward, second one back, third one back even further, something like that. So it's not where you'd expect it, just by force of experience really. Okay, so I'll see you in a minute just for a quick check-in when this hard work's done, and we'll be very close to finishing the setup. What I forgot to say is, while I'm doing this, I'm also going to soften off the edges of these frets as well, since that's something they're just still, they'll be a little bit sharp still where I've cut them, so a little bit of work like this and I'll just round them off. Got classic FM in the background there on my speakers, on my shed sound system. Anyway, and there we have it, refretted, cleaned up, polished and ready for new tuners and sort of an intonation, and everything nice and smooth to the touch. Nice new nut fitted on the end here, and yeah, ready to go. So that's going to hang up for, well, until Monday, because I won't get the tuners until Monday or something like that. But I'm not going to waste a set of strings putting them on right now, because all that will happen is they'll end up getting wasted. So we'll just leave it where it is for the time being. There you go. Can't wait. It's going to play beautifully. Wait, it's telling me, wait! Hey look, I've rushed ahead a little bit, only because I was on the Skype to my dad and I couldn't do the two things at once. But look, here we have Alex's Fender Lite Ash Telecaster, made in Korea, set up, ready to go. The only thing I've got to do, and I'll do now, is the intonation, which is actually pretty spot on because I've kind of physically judged it, but I'll do it fine tuning. We've got new frets, brand new frets, leveled. We've got new nut cut exactly to those really low 0.3 first fret action. We've got Graphtec string trees, and we've got these new tuners which you didn't see me put on, and I apologise for that, a bit naughty of me. But we have Vanson locking tuners on the back here. A couple of screws, I've just got to finish tightening them up. But yeah, Vanson locking tuners, which are, without a doubt, and make no mistake, they're not expensive tuners, they're budget tuners. So, sorry, with you in a sec, they are budget tuners, so they're under 30 quid, I can't remember, about £25. But what they give you, they're not, and obviously as a result they're not like 19:1 ratio, they're probably more like 14:1 ratio, which isn't the smoothest in the world. I mean, sorry, it's not the finest in the world, but what they give you is they give you the advantage of hardly any string around the post, and a very good locking mechanism, which means that you get to a tuning stability very quickly, but you have to do your stretching, as I always recommend on these videos. That's 50% of your tuning stability. The other 50% is a condition of your nut and the nut slots. So I've done the nut slots very carefully on this, and just feeling how this plays now, I can pretty much guarantee this is going to have gone from irritating to, oh my god, I love to play it. Just going to do the last bit really, which is the intonation bit, for which I'll need a strap and a little cable. Yeah, it's very nice how this plays. I kind of knew it from where I got to with the fret leveling and the old sacrificial strings, but obviously this bit now is just the very fine tuning with the intonation, and it should be spot on. There's still some little tiny dents excuse me, on the neck, but again I'm not going to go out to try and fix those. They're sort of part of the guitar's history, I guess, and it's only where the thumb lands anyway. If it was on the other side, it might kind of tempt me to do it, but okay. So again, I never trust my own straps in the shed because I don't want them to fall off. Right, so just to intonate, and again, while I'm intonating, I always listen out for the pings. Okay, so it is sharp, sharp, sharp. Lengthen the string, I say. Let's just check it a couple of times. These are in pairs, so I don't get a lot of choice in, well, I don't get a lot of control between the two pairs of each of the pair. That's showing quite sharp, so that's showing sharp too, which means it's too short. So I'm going to take this here screwdriver and pull this here fella back somewhat. It's going to change the pitch, obviously. And constantly at this point I'm always listening out for the pings that tell me if I've got any more widening needing doing on the nut slots. Still a bit sharp, so I'm going to come back for some more. I'm conscious this feels to me it's working. It's just I've got to put a lot of pressure on it because it's getting a little warm, this screwdriver. Time to replace it. Now I think one of the things that Alex, I remember him telling me, was couldn't get the thing intonated. We'll see. See a little bit of stretch still in that A, but that's okay. Okay, it's on. That's on. Okay, so there's our position for the low E. So it looks quite extreme, so I'm going to haul the others back a little bit because I don't think they'll be quite as extreme to intonate, or sorry, the distances I doubt would be that far apart between them. So I'm going to yank them together a bit. Again, tuning will be out. What's nice about this, by the way, is that you've got all the bends are freed up on this. That the setting, the combination of the action I've got on here right now and the whatever the polishing of the frets did, just cleared up the notes so you can get bends out of them. Still very low, it's 1mm at the last fret, which I'm pleased at for a 9.5 radius. Let's try the D now. Fraction sharp, so they both will come back some. And I'm going to bring back the E and the B as well to a similar kind of stagger because I don't want them that far out. Okay, again we'll be sharp. no pings at the nut. So all in good playing order. Right, go over to the D. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. That's very good. Oh, I'm happy. So there we go. I'm just going to bring this up here. Why not? Since we're done, Alex, we're done. This is coming back to you. Actually, I'm not going to rush it. I'm going to hold it today and I'll get it coming back to you tomorrow earliest. But, because I just like to I like to deliberately slow myself down. I'm guilty very often of going too quick with this, or sending it off too quick before I'm completely, absolutely certain. Just a couple more pulls. I've done some stretches already, or bends. Quite low output pickups by the feel of it, looking at my settings. But they don't half sound like Telecasters. Take that a fraction higher. Now currently, like I said, it's 1 millimeter at that last fret. Yeah, I'm just gonna hike that up just a smidgen on the end there, because I want those bends more than I want ultra lowness. We're expecting to get a bit stretched still. I'm doing it relative tuning, but you could do it with tuner. it's probably better to do it with the reverb off if you're relative tuning. Spanky and sharp and clean. Loads of room there. I still went off the edge, but that's because of my technique. That one Jack and Diane, isn't it? Well, there you go. It's Telecaster. Remember when you were young, shone like the sun. Da, 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 da. That one. go next? G. No, it's not G. That one E flat. Right here. We know that bit. Looks like a G minor. What bit am I trying to play? I've lost where I am. There's a look in your eye. Black holes in the sky. Shine, 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 down. Around that G minor, isn't it? There you go. So Telecaster, not really for that type of. Well, I suppose Gilmour sometimes plays Telecaster. It's got that lovely fluty tone. Oh, and there's, of course, there's Brian May, isn't there? Can't play this either, but. That one. It'll be Freddie. D. Yeah. The only time, I keep going to that same place, the E flat. It's the only time I ever saw Brian May play anything else other than his Red Special or his copy, duplicate. Niche. Okay, there we go, we're done. We are intonated, standard staggering shape of 3. Looks like it's further back than Alex, you originally had it. And in fact, when I remember this guitar from receiving it, you had the saddles all in a line, so it wouldn't have been anywhere near intonated anyway. But I can imagine you giving up in frustration at some point. But there we go. We have it. Now, just looking at the pickup heights, it's pretty good actually. I wouldn't change it. They're not high output, simple as that, but they do have a lovely tone. Why change that? There you go, fantastic. Fingers crossed then this goes from irritating to indispensable, and job will be done. But Alex, thank you so much for choosing to send it down to me. It's been a pleasure. I will put these, nice thing about these, by the way, is that they cover over the little holes that locate these, so you can obviously go backwards if you want to, but what it tells you is pretty much any standard size tuner like this 10mm hole tuner will cover the original Fender locating lug holes, which is cool. Obviously you've got the 45-degree angle now screwed in here, so any replacements would probably, unless they're these Fender 2 lug things, any quality replacement with a 45-degree tuner screw fitting will kind of replace these out nicely if you want to go even better quality. That's if this guitar becomes your firm favourite. Okay, there we have it. Time to move on to, guess what, another Telecaster, and I've got another one coming. It's amazing.